Hi, welcome to Faith, Hope, Love, the title that I have given to this brand new YouTube channel, and I thank you for joining me. This is only the third video I have ever put together, and as I said last time, I'm a nervous wreck, trust me. I would rather preach to thousands, as I have done in the past, than I would to do this in the comfort of my own cave. We're calling it Faith, Hope, Love, from the Caveman. Somebody suggested I call it from the Caveman here in Jerusalem. And as you look around, you can see that the stonework here is just like a cave. My whole apartment is like a cave. In fact, it is a cave. It's below ground somewhat, and these stones are 500-600 years old, as I mentioned last time. Ancient Jerusalem stones, and trust me, in the heat and humidity of a Jerusalem summer, believe you me, it's wonderful to be down here and find it to be quite cool. Thank you for joining me. I trust that you will subscribe and get your friends and neighbors and colleagues to subscribe. I will be honored, and you can see the link, I believe, on the screen. And if not, please write me. In fact, do write me, because I would love to hear from you and hear about you and pray for you. My email address is Turner Allen. I'm Alan Turner, and it's Turner first, Allen second, TurnerAlan 105@gmail.com. Turner Allen 105@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. You know, the subject of leadership has been on my mind for quite some time. We are all taken up with leadership in one way, shape, form or another. If it's not political, it's church leadership perhaps. And I believe that it's a subject that is not being addressed in the Christian church as much as it ought to be, because leadership's an incredibly, extremely important subject. And Paul talks about his disciples teaching others who'll be able to teach others. And I don't think we do enough of that in the church. We have meetings and meetings and meetings, and we have Bible studies and Bible studies and Bible studies. But you know, the New Testament pattern of raising leaders was one-on-one. Paul with the Timothy, Paul with the Barnabas, Paul with the John Mark. And this is what I would love to see fostered more and more in Christian churches, where a man takes a young man under his wings and mentors him and trains him to be a leader. I think we've misunderstood the whole subject of leadership. Excuse me. Frog in the throat. Leadership is not something you do. In the Christian church, we have majored on doing. We have majored on service and not servanthood. But leadership is not something you do. It is something you are. It's your character. It's who you are in your heart. And I have been a failure in many areas of leadership in years gone by. I have failed, and I've had to know the joy and wonder of God's forgiveness, and I've also had to apply the forgiveness to myself, and that's something that many of us find very difficult to do. But thank God, God is a God of grace and a God of forgiveness and a God of restoration. Leadership is what you are and who you are. I recall many years ago a man going up to a preacher, and he asked him a question. He said, "Do you prepare your prayers?" And the preacher said, "No, but I prepare myself." That is the true ministry of preaching, not the preparation of the sermon and delivering it, but the preparation of a man and delivering him. One of the many leaders in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 20, is the story of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah. How the Moabites and the Ammonites came against Judah and came against Jehoshaphat in particular. And in verse 2 of chapter 20, it doesn't say that they came against us. It says they came against Jehoshaphat. Why? Because Jehoshaphat was a born leader. God had raised him up to be the king. And so the enemy was coming against him. And I'm sure that there are many who today are coming against Israel because they can't stand Bibi Netanyahu, our prime minister, who I believe has done righteously and lived righteously and not without fault. No man is. The only man who never committed a crime they hung on a cross, and that was Yeshua, Jesus. But the enemies of Judah were coming against Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles, and he was also being chastened and disciplined by God. And that's something that we Christians cringe away from. We don't want to think of God chastening us and disciplining us. But you know what? I have been through the fire of God's discipline many times in my 65 years of being a believer. It's never easy to go through. It's not without its pain and its hurt. But I can promise you that when we've been through the fire, just like gold, we come out hopefully shining a lot brighter. You know, when we're disciplined, we have a choice. We can either rebel against God or we can submit to God. Well, Jehoshaphat submitted to God's discipline, and the whole nation was fearful of what was happening on their borders as the enemies of Judah prepared to wage war against Jehoshaphat. But in verse 3 it says that Jehoshaphat set himself to seek the Lord. 2 Chronicles 20 verse 3. And I'm glad that history and the Bible record the fears, the human fears that Jehoshaphat had. There's 2 types of fear. There's the fear of God, which, as you know, is the beginning of wisdom. But there's also, that's the reverential fear, that we revere God's name. We understand his nature, his holiness, his awesomeness, his character. So we fear God, and it's the beginning of wisdom. But there's the other fear, the nervous fear that we all have. I remember the fears I've had. One stands out. I was being taken to take 2 weeks Bible study on the island of Jersey, and my friend flew me in his plane, and the flaps failed, can you believe it? And we were coming into the cliff, and we were going to hit the cliff, and he and I would end up in eternity. But thank God, in his mercy and grace, and miraculously, those flaps opened just before we climbed up over the cliff top and onto the runway, which, if you've been to Jersey Airport in the Channel Islands, you will know that the runway goes right over the top of the cliff. I was nervous. You bet I was nervous. And the Bible doesn't hide Jehoshaphat's nervousness. He was human. All leaders are human. They are flesh and blood like you and me. And we need to give them a lot more slack than we do give them. You know, they are human beings. They are people. And humanness and sinfulness are not synonymous terms. They are very different. So the Bible doesn't gloss over the faults of its leaders. Look at Moses. Look at Elijah. Look at Isaac. Look at Jacob, the deceiver and the liar, the con man, if you like. And yet God built his covenant around these men, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So why does the Bible record the faults of men, of leaders? Well, I think it's because of a verse that we can read about in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27, which says, "No human being should boast in the presence of God." God chose the foolish of the world, the weakest of the world, the low and despised of the world. He chose such people, you and I. So leadership is not what you do, but leadership is what you are and who you are. Generally speaking, a congregation never rises above its leaders. I believe a good leader should be a man who takes a little more than his share of the blame and a little less than his share of the credit. David, as you recall in the Psalms, was it Psalm 139, I trust, where he cried out, "Search me, O God. Search me, O God." And God's chosen residence is a broken heart and a contrite spirit. I believe that the real test of being a New Testament Christian believer and a New Testament saint, which you and I are as professing Christians, the real test is not on whether or not I can preach the gospel. It's not on whether or not you can evangelize your friends. The real test is when I'm able to wash the feet of another. In other words, to humble myself and do the things that do not count in the estimate of man, but count everything in the estimate of God. Sadly, too many of us are far more willing to give a service than to be a servant. But someone once said many years ago, no amount of activity in the king's service will ever make up for the king himself. This is what ought to be the walk of a Christian. It's not about meetings. It's not about services. It's not about clubs. It's the heart. And this is why I believe that the essence of being a Christian today is relationship. Relationship with God, relationship with family, relationship with friends, relationship with my fellow man. And when Jehoshaphat sought God, and when Jehoshaphat cried out to God and encouraged the people to respond as they did in verse 4 of 2 Chronicles 20. As a nation, they gathered together for corporate prayer and intercession, and they cried out to God. And God heard and God answered. And maybe we'll take this up more next time. I thank you for joining me. I hope that a few devotional thoughts this morning have been a blessing to you. I hope you'll pass it on, encourage others to subscribe to this channel. Give me your critique, and you have my email, TurnerAlan, ALAN 105@gmail.com. And I thank you for your time in joining me today. Please bear with me as I go through these embryonic videos in the early start of this channel, because trust me, I am technically impaired when it comes to cyberspace and computers and cell phones, and I have friends around me who have the utmost impatience with me to help me and to hopefully help me improve this channel and see this channel improve so it can be a blessing to multitudes globally. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you.